I'm a headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for Week 17. Cannot believe we're already in Week 17, Championship Week. Week 17. This is it, guys. If you have a fantasy championship this week, I hope you're in it, and I hope that this injury update will help you guys just like every other week of the season. I'm going to go through every single NFL matchup, let you guys know which injuries you need to know about for your fantasy teams. As always, this show is brought to you by our boys over at Fantrax. Make sure you download the Fantrax app and let them know that the headliner sent you. But let's get right into it. Week 17 injury update show, Champions Edition. Let's roll. All right, guys, as always, we're going to start with a moment of silence. We had a lot of guys be put on IR this week, but two of the most fantasy relevant guys that we need to talk about are Nico Collins for the Texans. He has been placed on IR with his foot injury, and then Ryan Tannehill for the Titans was placed on IR as well. Their seasons are done. But perhaps the biggest injury of the week is actually not to a fantasy relevant player, but it is going to affect a lot of fantasy teams, and that's Bengals starting right tackle Lyle Collins has an ACL tear. He is done for the year. The Bengals are having some pretty bad injury luck to end the season. Not looking forward to seeing them without their starting right tackle. And this one is perhaps more interesting than an actual injury, but quarterback Derek Carr is being intentionally sat for the final 2 weeks of the season to ensure that an injury clause in his contract doesn't activate. If Carr were to play and get hurt to the point where he could not pass his physical next summer, he'd be fully guaranteed north of $40 million. Now, the team opting to sit him, make sure that he is healthy for that physical, tells us that it's a pretty likely scenario that he is not going to be with the Raiders next season. They're most likely going to cut him, and they don't want to have to be locked in to a $40 million deal with Derek Carr. Very rare to see this type of move being made at a level of a player this level. Normally teams don't sit their starting quarterback, but like I said, basically locks in Derek Carr to not be a Raider next season. It is kind of injury related, so I figured I'd throw it in here because he is also done for the season. Let's pour some out for those guys who were hurt in the chat and pour one out for Derek Carr because guy's going to be out a lot of money if they cut him. Now, heading over to our accuracy recap. Every single week of the season, I look back at last week and let you guys know how I did last week. Pretty solid week, 97%. On my in-out calls. I'm up to 90% on the year. Really proud of that number, finally making it up to 90%. You guys know that was one of my goals for this season. I did have some misses, though. I was surprised that Trayvon Diggs was able to play despite being sick on Thursday. And then I was surprised that Mecole Hardman has not been activated off the IR yet. I did tell you guys to sit Jakobi Meyers last week. In my defense, though, I did say that when he's healthy, he is a target hog. So I did preface that if he was healthy, he was a target hog. Meyers played 100% of the offensive snaps in Week 16. The first time he has done that, been over 62%, that is, since Week 11. So he is finally healthy. Regardless, I did say to sit him, and I'm sorry about that. He finished as the wide receiver 10 on the week. I also barely missed my prize pick play of the week. Miles Sanders was short by 4 yards on hitting his over, so that was a tough loss for me, but technically was a miss as well. But I did have some hits last week. I said Saquon Barkley was going to put up a top 12 week, finished as the RB3 overall in half PPR. Told you guys to sit Treylon Burks. He finished with just 1.5 half PPR points last week. Terrible week for him. Told you guys I was okay with starting Dallas Goedert coming off of his injury. He finished as the tight end 12 on the week. Not sexy, but tight ends rarely are. I told you guys to sit Deontay Johnson and Courtland Sutton last week. They actually finished tied as the wide receiver 37 with just 8.9 half PPR points. So hopefully you guys listened on those. But that's all I got for the accuracy recap. Moment of silence. Let's head in to the Week 17 slate. All right, guys, week 17 did start out on Thursday night with a Cowboys and Titans game that saw a lot of people being sat. The Titans season comes down to next week with the Jags. They rested nearly their entire starting offense, as well as most of their good defensive players, but that includes running back Derrick Henry. Huge loss for anybody who needed Derrick Henry to put up a good week. He was sat intentionally. Not really injury related. They're listing him with a hip because they have to, but it doesn't seem like that's something that's going to keep him out next week. But if you needed Derrick Henry, that was an absolutely brutal blow to have him sit in a game where he should have been playing and healthy. Really tough. As for the Cowboys, they were also without running back Tony Pollard, dealing with the thigh injury. Not surprising if you follow the news out of Cowboys practices this week. Pollard was not seen on the field at all in practice, but that's why you guys got to watch those Thursday night games. They can be tricky. I did give everybody a heads up if you were a member in our group chat on Discord about Tony Pollard possibly missing this week. So hopefully you guys are still members of Headliner Nation. Make sure that you're signed up for those memberships because you do get extra bonus updates from the doc. Heading over to the Sunday early slate, we got the Cardinals at the Falcons. More running back news here. We're going to have a lot of running backs in this injury episode. It's going to be tough sledding to find starting running backs this week. Running back James Conner dealing with illness. Hasn't practiced yet this week. Officially a game time decision for Sunday. Quarterback Colt McCoy dealing with his concussion. Missed last week, but is back practicing in full. Should start for the Cardinals, but he should not be starting for your fantasy teams. As for the Falcons, no major injuries to talk about, so they should be good to go. Not really sure it's a sexy option, but Cordero Patterson, I guess, could be a starting running back for some fantasy squads this week. Heading over to the Bears at the Lions. Bears are hurting at wide receiver. Chase Claypool dealing with a knee sprain. Missed 2 weeks with this knee injury, but did get a limited session in on Thursday. He's a game time decision, but is trending towards playing this week. Wide receiver Equanimeous St. Brown has got a concussion, still working through concussion protocol, but got limited working on Thursday. He should play and clear this week, but we'll keep an eye on it. Wide receiver Dante Pettis dealing with an ankle sprain. Caught a touchdown last week, but was downgraded on Thursday to a DNP. He's now a game time decision, but he really shouldn't be put in your rosters for fantasy championship week anyway. Right guard Tevin Jenkins dealing with that neck injury is back practicing in full. Should be able to play. Good news for the Bears run game. Looking to repeat an absolute beatdown that the Panthers put on the Lions defense last week. So we're hoping that the Bears can also find some magic in the run game because their wide receivers are pretty banged up this week. As for the Lions, safety Deshaun Elliott dealing with the shoulder sprain, still not practicing and doesn't look like he's going to be ready to play. Based on how the team performed last week, it's pretty clear that Elliott not being able to play is a big factor for both their pass and run game. He's one of their better tacklers, kind of cleaned up a lot of big runs for them. So the fact that he is unlikely to play this week does give me some hope that we're going to see a big running week from Justin Fields and David Montgomery. Heading over to the Jags at the Texans. Jags quarterback Trevor Lawrence is dealing with that toe injury. He still showed up on the injury report, but is playing through it. The Jags technically also don't need this game. They're like the Titans. Their season is going to come down to next week in their matchup with the Titans, but they have said that they don't plan on sitting their starters because they are not soft. I think that's kind of some gamesmanship by the Jags. They're saying, hey, we're not going to sit our guys. We're going to play this week, and then we're going to punch you in the mouth next week. Big energy for the Jags heading into that very important game. Linebacker Trayvon Walker, dealing with his ankle sprain, is back practicing in limited capacity, should be able to play this week. Good news for them. As for the Texans, center Jimmy Morrissey dealing with a concussion, not practicing, unlikely to play, but you're probably not starting anyone in the run game for the Texans anyway. Heading over to the Broncos at the Chiefs, a game that I'm sure the NFL thought was going to be a primetime, big-time game. Not looking quite so sexy now that we've gotten to Week 17. The Broncos have 16 players on their injury report, but wide receiver Courtland Sutton was able to come back last week. He is still dealing with the hamstring strain as practicing. in a limited capacity, but he should be able to play. Tight end Greg Dulcich dealing with a hamstring strain as well. One of the few bright spots at tight end this season, but has not been practicing and now looks doubtful for this week's championship game. So if you were trusting Greg Dulcich, make sure that you find a backup plan for the tight end position, because it looks like he might not play this week. And the linebackers for the Broncos are beat up right now. Baron Browning has a back issue. Randy Gregory still dealing with his knee issue. Both those guys are not practicing this week. Doesn't look like they're going to be able to play, setting up potentially a big Isaiah Pacheco week if the Chiefs get a lead on this Broncos squad. As for the Chiefs, we're still talking about Mecole Hardman. Are they going to clear him? Are they not? We don't know for sure yet. Has been on IR, is eligible to return, but we still don't have any official word. He's going to be a game time decision. Side note, the Chiefs are really healthy right now. Not a whole lot of injuries to any major players outside of Hardman. If you're looking for Super Bowl bets or teams that you think are going to potentially make it to the Super Bowl or make it to the AFC Championship, I think the Chiefs are a pretty safe bet from an injury perspective. Just trying to help you guys out if you're making those types of bets. I'm not telling you to. I'm just saying if you are, the Chiefs are probably the healthiest contender of all the teams that have Super Bowl aspirations. Moving on to the Dolphins at the Patriots. Dolphins have 13 players on the injury report, but quarterback Tua Tagovailoa dealing with a concussion again for the third time, officially second time, but let's be honest, we know he had 2 concussions earlier in the year. He threw 3 picks in the second half. After the game, he reported concussion symptoms to his training staff. Now, Tua has been at the forefront of the concussion debate in the NFL this season, but I have to applaud him for being honest with his training staff, being honest with the staff because of these symptoms. It's very possible that he did not have symptoms during the game, which is why he was allowed to finish, but concussions are tricky. Sometimes you don't get the symptoms right away. It takes a little bit for them to set in. It sounds like that was the case for Tua. Clearly, his play was indicating that he was not at 100% in that second half, but I do applaud him for being honest with his team. A lot of guys could potentially try to hide this thing, and we want the players to be healthy. We want them to protect their brains, because this is one of those things that we don't want the NFL coming down hard on concussions and forcing players to miss multiple weeks every time they get one. And this is part of it. The players have to be honest when something comes up. That being said, they don't expect Tua to play this week. Teddy Bridgewater is expected to start. Linebacker Bradley Chubb dealing with hand and ankle injuries, isn't practicing now. He seems unlikely that he's going to be able to play. And then offensive tackle Teron Armstead, he has a toe, pec, knee, and hip issues. He's the only guy on all the teams that has 4 separate body parts being listed in the injury report. He's a game time decision. He's tough as nails. Doesn't look like it's going to be able to stop him from playing, but just know that he is pretty banged up. You just have to wonder when they're going to give this guy a rest, because clearly his body is failing him right now. As for the Patriots, they also have 13 guys on their injury report. A lot of guys dealing with injuries for both of these teams, but wide receiver Devontae Parker coming off that concussion, still not back practicing after 2 missed games with a concussion. Very concerned for him. He's unlikely to play and may be done for the year. Tight ends Jonnu Smith dealing with a concussion and Hunter Henry dealing with a knee sprain, both missing practices. Smith seems unlikely to play. He's not practicing at all. Henry is banged up, but is limited. He should be able to play through. So Hunter Henry, if you're looking for a cheap option, maybe you had Greg Dulcich starting for you, check your waiver wires for Hunter Henry. When Jonnu's out, he is a pretty solid tight end option. Again, no sexy tight ends by any stretch, but Hunter Henry does at least get some run when Jonnu Smith is out and could get you a touchdown. So that's all you're really hoping for at this point. Running back Damian Harris dealing with a thigh contusion, took a personal day on Thursday, but did practice on Wednesday. He practiced last week, but still got ruled out. So we're still kind of keeping an eye on this. He's a game time decision, but I'm still a little bit more confident that he's going to be able to play this week. Running back Ramondre Stevenson dealing with an ankle sprain. was limited all week and coming off a really bad week last week. He's a really risky start with Harris returning, this injury clearly affecting him. I just don't know how much I trust Ramondre Stevenson. He's more of an RB2 for me versus an RB1, which he has shown that he can do repeatedly this season. It just seems like he's kind of puttering towards the end of the year with this injury and now a lot of competition in the backfield. And then the cornerbacks for the Patriots are pretty banged up. Jack Jones dealing with a knee sprain. Marcus Jones has a concussion. Jalen Mills has a groin strain. All these guys are out of practice right now and unlikely to play. So we could be potentially looking at an okay start for Teddy Bridgewater. I know it's not a sexy name, but if he can get the ball to their wide receivers, the cornerbacks for the Patriots are really banged up. So I'm not opposed if you're in a 2-quarterback league and you're really desperate for a second quarterback. I feel like Teddy Bridgewater could get you a safe 10 to 15 points. I'm not saying he's going to be a quarterback one, but the team is built for a not so sexy quarterback to put up solid weeks. I think Teddy Bridgewater could do that this week against a really banged up Patriots secondary. Heading over to the Colts at the Giants. Colts cornerback Kenny Moore II dealing with the ankle sprain, still not practicing. Doesn't appear that he's going to be able to return by the end of this season. Wide receiver Ashton Dulin dealing with a concussion. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. As for the Giants, guard Shane Lemieux, dealing with that toe injury, was finally placed on IR. He's done for the year. Good news, though, is that cornerback Adoree Jackson's knee sprain is improving. He's back practicing, which is bad news for Colts pass catchers, but not quite as bad as the fact that they are still sticking with quarterback Nick Foles. Just not a good time to be a Colts wide receiver right now. Heading over to the Saints at the Eagles. Saints running back Alvin Kamara is dealing with a quadricep injury, and it has taken a personal day as well. Has not practiced yet this week, and ominously cleared his Instagram of any Saints mentions. I don't know if that's really injury related, but it's worth knowing that he might possibly be a little upset with the Saints right now. Is trouble brewing for the running back? We know he's got some legal issues got to figure out. If he is not able to play, Taysom Hill is going to tick off a lot of people in championship matchups this week as a tight end working primarily as a running back. Will we see a cheat code tight end 1 week for Taysom Hill? I would like to see it just because I love the chaos, but I would be pretty upset if I lost my fantasy championship to a running back pretending to be a tight end. Wide receiver Chris Olave dealing with that hamstring strain, back practicing. Looks like he's going to be a game time decision, but is trending in the right direction. Linebacker Pete Warner, same deal, practicing. Looks like he's set for a return this week. Marshawn Lattimore dealing with broken ribs and a lacerated kidney, has been out since week 6. Is practicing, but is still a game time decision. So not a whole lot to say with those 3 guys, I know, but just know they're all trending towards possibly playing this week. As for the Eagles, they got a lot of issues going on right now. As far as Super Bowl contenders, the Eagles are probably in the worst spot from an injury perspective. We got quarterback Jalen Hurts dealing with an SC sprain, not an AC. So the AC is the acromioclavicular joint, which is your acromion, which is the point of your shoulder, and the clavicle. The SC is the sternoclavicular joint, which is the middle of your chest, your sternum, and the clavicle where it attaches on the inside, kind of more centrally located. That joint is a little bit trickier to rehab because you can't really do much with it. The other problem is that typically it takes a little bit longer for that joint to heal from a sprain. So SC sprain for Jalen Hurts, a little bit more clarity, but the sad news is it's more likely that he's going to miss multiple games with this than he would if it was just an AC sprain. He did practice in a limited capacity, though, but I still think we see Gardner Minshew starting this week for the Eagles, and maybe even next week if they can get a win against a Saints team that doesn't really have much to play for right now. Cornerback Avonte Maddox dealing with a toe injury. This is likely turf toe, but we haven't gotten official word on that yet. This injury was described as significant and will likely end Maddox's regular season and probably push more into the playoffs as well. So that's a big loss for the Eagles secondary. And then offensive tackle Lane Johnson dealing with a groin injury. Speaking of major injuries, Johnson's injury is probably the biggest one outside of Jalen Hurts for the Eagles. He was the kind of the driving force of arguably the best offensive line in football and is now expected to miss multiple weeks with this groin injury. So really really bad luck for the Eagles heading into the playoffs. They're looking a little vulnerable for an upset. So keep an eye on this Eagles team as they head to the playoffs. They are hoping at least that they can get a bye because they are hurting right now and they need the extra time off. Because if they have to go into a game where they don't get a bye, I am worried. I'm worried about the Eagles. I just don't know if they're going to have enough healthy bodies to put the same type of team that they started the year off with on the field. Very worried about the Eagles. Heading over to the Panthers at the Bucks. Can't believe that this game has playoff implications, but I guess technically it does. As for the Panthers, we got cornerback J.C. Horn dealing with a wrist injury. He had surgery, has already been ruled out this week, but the team's hoping he can come back next week. Good news for the Bucks pass catchers. Head on over to Prize Picks. Use the code HEADLINERS. Get a $100 first deposit match for your first deposit on Prize Picks, and put some money on Chris Godwin going over 69.5 receiving yards without J.C. Horn in the game. He's my Prize Pick play of the week. As for the Bucks, they are starting to get a little bit healthier, and not a whole lot of players that look like they're on track to miss this game. I'm sure a few of their defensive players will miss this game, but most of them are practicing at least in a limited capacity. Their O-line is getting healthy as well. Left tackle Tristan Wirfs dealing with a high ankle sprain, and Donovan Smith both practicing and are both expected to play. The defense, again, like I said, is practicing. So the Bucks are getting a little bit healthier. First time in months that the majority of their guys are practicing and look healthy enough to play. So we'll see. Maybe this Bucks team can turn their season around a little bit. If they can get a win here, they're still in line to make the playoffs unbelievably. But don't be surprised if we see like I'm just going to throw it out there, maybe a vintage Tom Brady game in this game. Higher stakes. Let's see if Tom Brady can bring his best. I would like to see one more run for Brady, even though that guy really did tick me off a lot as a Steelers fan when he was with the Patriots. Heading over to the Browns at the Commanders. Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper dealing with a hip injury. Was perhaps the biggest surprise for me last week. Really bad conditions for that game, but he still managed a pretty solid stat line for the week. Maybe he's getting something going with Deshaun Watson. I still think he is probably startable, even though I don't totally trust Deshaun Watson. I think Cooper is startable as kind of a target wide receiver one for the Browns. And then the Commanders have a few different injuries that we're looking at. Linebacker John Bostic dealing with a pec injury, unlikely to play this week, should open up some space for Nick Chubb. And then running back Antonio Gibson dealing with foot and knee injuries, not practicing, doesn't appear like he's likely to play. Brian Robinson's going to get plenty of opportunities, but he's going up against pretty good Browns defensive line. I'm not sure I love that matchup. Feels a little bit like a trap right now. The Commanders are moving back from Taylor Heineke to Carson Wentz, so we'll see what happens with that as well. All right, guys, let's head into the midday slate. We got 49ers at the Raiders. 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel is back practicing in a limited capacity as of Thursday. Finally got a limited practice in after 2 weeks of not practicing at all, but still a game time decision. And I think the team could opt to continue to sit him. They've kind of already got their playoffs lined up, and they want Deebo Samuel healthy. I'll be surprised if he plays this week. As for the Raiders, cornerback Rock Ya-Sin dealing with a knee sprain was finally placed on IR and is done for the year. Speaking of the end of the year, if you want to start out 2023 right, you need to head over to manscaped.com and get yourself something nice using the code HEADLINERS. Use the code HEADLINERS, get 20% off, get the free shipping, and get ready for an awesome year with the Headliners and Manscaped. Heading over to the Jets at the Seahawks, Jets quarterback Mike White dealing with that rib fracture. Man, what a difference a week can make. We've already got word from the Jets that they are done, D-O-N-E, done with Zach Wilson. So done, in fact, that they expect and have publicly made it obvious that they are moving on from him in the offseason. They do not expect Zach Wilson to play another game for the Jets. Luckily for anyone that's starting Garrett Wilson, Mike White is back and has been cleared for contact. He's a quarterback 2 for me this week against the Seahawks, a defense that's really struggling right now. As for the Seahawks offense, wide receiver Tyler Lockett dealing with that broken finger, had surgery 2 weeks ago, did practice in a limited capacity on Thursday. He's going to be a game time decision, but I think he's going to push to play. The Seahawks need some wins here to end the season. And then wide receiver Marquise Goodwin dealing with shoulder and wrist wrist injuries. Has been banged up for a few weeks, but this is the first time that he's not really practicing at all during the week. Right now, it seems like he's the long shot to play unless he can get some work in on Friday. Moving on to the Vikings at Green Bay. Vikings don't really have anyone to talk about. Green Bay, though, dealing with wide receiver Christian Watson's hip injury, has DNP'd twice this week already and is in serious danger of missing this game. Watson has cooled off a little bit since he exploded from weeks 10 to 13, but is still worth starting if he does manage to play because he is still Aaron Rodgers' #1 wide receiver. Moving on to the Battle of LA, we got the Rams versus the Chargers. Rams defensive lineman Aaron Donald not practicing. He's just done for the year. Just call it now. We're not going to see Aaron Donald for the rest of this season. The Rams are packing it up. As for the Chargers, maybe the most important injury from a fantasy perspective this week that we still need to hear about is running back Austin Eckler dealing with a knee sprain. Not much was made of this on Monday when this happened, but he went down late in that game, kind of twisted his knee, got his knee kind of rolled up under him. Luckily, he is practicing in a limited capacity, but any limitations could be bad news for Eckler. I do still expect him to play, but you can't sit. You can't sit Austin Eckler. But just know he is dealing with a knee issue, and it is concerning if you're trusting him for your fantasy matchups, your fantasy championships in Week 17. Heading over to Sunday Night Football, Steelers at the Ravens. Steelers don't really have any major injuries to talk about. The Ravens have 15 guys on their injury report, none of them more important than quarterback Lamar Jackson dealing with a PCL sprain. Jackson isn't practicing yet. Doesn't look like there's going to be any real chance that he plays in this game. Haven't even really seen optimism on a timeline on when they expect him to return. The team is still currently expected to make the playoffs, but they could absolutely collapse to end this season and potentially miss the playoffs. The Steelers need a win to stay in the hunt, and I would like to see it happen. I want the Steelers to keep winning. I want Mike Tomlin to keep that streak alive of going over 500 for his entire NFL career. I just think that's a crazy streak, and I hope the Steelers are ready to play this week. Cornerback Marcus Peters dealing with the calf strain. Defensive end Calais Campbell dealing with a knee sprain, both sitting out, unlikely to play this week. So the Ravens are primed to get upset by my Steelers. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, and probably one of the best games we're going to see this month prior to the playoffs, a possible AFC Championship game preview. We've got the Bills at the Bengals. Bills center Mitch Morse dealing with a concussion, back to full practices. He's expected to play. Free safety Jordan Poyer's dealing with a knee sprain. Didn't practice yesterday. Now he's going to be a game time decision. We'll see if he can suit up. And then wide receiver Stephon Diggs dealing with illness should play, but keep an eye on it. It is a Monday night game. It is Stephon Diggs. This is something we need to be paying attention to. We're hoping that we get some confirmation, either him practicing on Friday or some word Saturday before we have to make decisions on Stephon Diggs. I'd be afraid to sit him even against this Bengals defense that has been decent against wide receivers the last few weeks. As for the Bengals, defensive end Sam Hubbard's dealing with his calf strain, is back practicing in a limited capacity. The team needs him healthy and already has a playoff berth lined up. So the Bengals are making the playoffs. I think they could sit Sam Hubbard unless they want to try to make a statement against the Bills here at home. I'm going to be just optimistic and say I think that they expect him to play, but I would not be surprised if they sat him for his own good. And then tight end Hayden Hurst with a calf strain, back practicing in full and is startable, with tight end being just an absolute mess. Let's put it that way. That's probably the nice way to put the way the tight end position has played out the last few weeks. All right, guys, that's it for your Week 17 injury update show. If there anybody I missed, let me know in the comments down below. Wishing you guys the best of luck for your fantasy championships. Hopefully you guys can bring it home. Let me know on Twitter at eTurnerFF. Let me know if you guys won some chips this weekend. I love seeing you guys succeeding and winning fantasy championships for Headliner Nation. I appreciate all of you guys out there that have stuck with me for 17 weeks. It was a little different this year. I was doing all the shows by myself. First year I've ever done that, but I appreciate all the love and support you guys have given me. Wishing you guys a great fantasy championship, a great New Year's, and we will see you next week for those very few Week 18 fantasy championships. I'm not going to leave you guys hanging. We will be back next week.